Hi there. Here's your Tuesday, April 21st edition of Mark Madness. And today we're going to read an interesting little story. It's pretty brief, but it's pretty confusing. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to stop the video and read the story for yourself and see if you can make heads or tails of what in the world is going on. It's short, confusing, but a pretty powerful little story. So it's Mark chapter 7, verses 24 to 30. Pause the video before you listen to my explanation of it. Well, hopefully you've read it, because if you have, you can see that it's a confusing story. But we always have to keep things in context. Remember where we've been over the last 3 days. Mark chapter 7, verses 1 to 23 are all about cleanliness and uncleanliness and the tradition of the elders, and how Jesus confronts the Old Testament external rituals of cleansing and things like that, and really gets to the heart of what holiness is about. That holiness begins internally and then precedes externally. And he does away with food laws, and he does away with many of the systems of cleanliness and uncleanliness that characterized the Old Testament law. Well, now Jesus is confronted by a woman, and it's as if she is going to say, "All right, Jesus, are you going to put your money where your mouth is? Are you going to practice what you preach?" Here's why I say that. Notice that Jesus goes up to Tyre. If you look at a map of Israel, there's the Sea of Galilee in the north. And if you went northwest about 30 miles to the shore of the Mediterranean Sea, modern day Lebanon, you'd find yourself in Tyre. What's important about this is that Tyre is a Greek city. These are not Jews that Jesus is interacting with. And in fact, Mark makes that very clear in the text. In verse 26, he says, "The woman was a Greek, born in Syrian Phoenicia, and she begs Jesus to drive the demon out of her daughter." It's important to note that she is Greek, and she's actually from a place that has a long and storied history with the nation of Israel, where they've been battling against one another. So there would be some bad blood there historically. But she's Greek. She's not Jewish. What does that mean in the Old Testament system? She is inherently unclean, right? I mean, whereas a pot could become unclean and then it could become clean again through certain rituals, she's a Greek. She's a Gentile. I mean, by her very nature, she is unclean. And Jesus' initial reaction to her seems pretty harsh. She asks for healing. And Jesus says, "First, let the children eat all they want, for it is not right to take the children's bread and toss it to the dogs." He's calling the Greeks dogs. Basically, what Jesus is doing here is acknowledging that his mission begins with the nation of Israel. Those are the children. Jesus is saying in somewhat of a strong way, "I've first come to reestablish the nation of Israel, because it's the nation of Israel that are members of Abraham's family, and they're to be the blessing to the nations. So I'm going to start with them, and then we're going to go to all of the nations." And so Jesus is talking about a priority of mission. And we see this priority of mission all throughout the Gospels. Jesus' first disciples are all Jewish, and he sends them out to Jewish towns. So that's not to say he's not trying to include all of the nations. It's just to say he's starting with Israel. Well, this woman calls him on it. And she says, "Lord." The only time somebody calls Jesus Lord in the Gospel of Mark is this unclean Greek woman. "Lord," she replied, "even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs." In some weird way, she's pushing back at Jesus. And in some weird way, she acknowledges, "Hey, that's cool. You're going to the nation of Israel first. You're Israel's Messiah. I get that. But there are still leftovers for us." And you know what? She wins the argument. Jesus says, "For such a reply, you may go. The demon has left your daughter." Really, what this story is about, in some ways, it continues this clean, unclean discussion, but now we're dealing about the right and the wrong people. And this woman, this unclean Gentile woman, argues with Jesus, and dare we say, wins the argument by saying, "Jesus, are you going to practice what you preach? You're talking about cleanliness, I know I'm unclean, but you are here for unclean people. It's a great little story, and people debate about it because it makes Jesus sound kind of harsh. It makes him seem very uncompassionate and ungracious, unlike he very often is in the Gospels. But it tells something significant about Jesus' ministry and about Jesus going to the unclean Gentiles, because that's where the kingdom of God is overflowing. To be a blessing to the nations, and that's exactly what we're seeing here. So it's a beautiful message. I think in terms of application, one thing is to seize the gospel's for all people. No matter how unclean, no matter how broken, no matter how messed up, no matter what your life experiences are, you are welcome into the kingdom of God through faith in Jesus Christ. Nothing can stop that. Nobody is too far removed. And if that's the way God thinks about people, we need to think about people in the same way. We need to welcome people with the love of the kingdom of God, no matter who they are, no matter where they've been, no matter how hurting they are, how much they've hurt us. They need the good news of the kingdom of God too.